Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Pro Rugby VMRL or Major League Rugby MLR. Sorry, Major League Rugby. I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul, and do feel free to join in with the comments in the rugby chat. Please just you put some comments below. I'm always up for a good rugby chat. So my friend the Scottish Cannon put a question out there on Twitter, asking what's the difference between Pro Rugby and Major League Rugby, or MLR. And there is a whole host of them. There are two very different entities entirely. And so I thought I'd run through some of those. Some of these we did discuss last week during the rugby discussion, talking about governance of the game, particularly in the USA. And we covered off on quite a few of these sort of things. So Pro Rugby. Pro Rugby, for those of you that don't know, was a professional rugby league that took place last year between 5 teams that were set up by Doug. Now, all those teams were owned by Pro Rugby, the central organisation, and the central organisation centrally contracted players and decided who would play where, obviously in discussion with those players. So it was a centrally controlled, all owned by one person tournament, and they have an exclusive sanctioning agreement with USA Rugby that runs through until early next year. Part of the agreement of that is they have to host a tournament every year. So at the moment there has been no announcement as to what or if that tournament might be this year. So as we're already more than a quarter of the way through the year, we're looking at, well, actually more than a third of the way through the year now. It's looking increasingly unlikely that Pro Rugby will actually exist. But but the setup was owned by one person centrally. The setup for Major League Rugby is that it's a group of clubs coming together to create a tournament. So much more along the lines of what we've seen in England, for example, where a bunch of clubs came together to create the Aviva Premiership. So the risk is spread across all of those clubs rather than being held by one person from a financial point of view. It does mean that if one person, it also means that there are multiple people who have a say, so it's not going to be, so it's not just one person's vision, it's a group of people's vision, which can lead to conflict, as opposed to one person just dictatorially saying this is how we will go. That obviously has its pros and cons, is that there are checks and balances on which way it goes, but it also can mean that a competition goes in a direction that some of its participants don't want it to, and can obviously lead to internal arguing. So the two tournaments are very different in their administration side, and that will, and also on the size. So Major League Rugby has announced 9 teams that will take part in year 1, whereas Pro Rugby aimed for 6 and ended up with 5. 9 of those, 9 of those 10 teams have been announced already. Plus, we've seen one team change from it was going to be Chicago. They're now not taking part, but Minneapolis is instead. So Chicago, you would imagine, once they get everything in place, would be joining in future years. So they're also talking about expansion in future years, which, if you're talking about that sort of size of competition and you're talking expansions, we are talking conferences not too far down the line. Quite who that last 10th team is going to be, we don't know yet. There are suggestions it might be, I heard one person suggest it might be a Canadian team, but as I say, there's been no news yet as to how or who that 10th team might be. But the key difference is that Pro Rugby was owned by one person. Major League Rugby is a group of clubs coming together, which makes it a very different organisation. They're looking at starting in the spring of next year, which coincidentally, and I don't think there's any coincidence about it at all, is when the Pro Rugby exclusive sanctioning agreement runs out. And so I believe, so we'll look at, now Major League Rugby has so far not said that it will be entirely professional. Some of the teams within the organisation are putting together elite or professional teams, such as the Austin Huns. And I did say and I said most of them do exist. I think there's 2 teams that are actually going to come in that aren't going to be clubs, but they're not centrally owned. They'll be owned by themselves. They're not existing clubs, and existing clubs are setting up separate companies to obviously protect them, a bit like London Welsh did in the UK. So London Welsh, the professional team went bankrupt, but the amateur club still exists, and the name still exists as part of that. And so you can see there is a chance London Welsh will rise again up through the ranks. And I have heard a plan that's been put together to get them back into the national leagues. Similarly, it looks like a number of these clubs are setting up a commercial company or commercial group to run the professional or the Major League Rugby team, so it doesn't impact the existing club if this doesn't work out and it fails. I guess one of the things we should not really be surprised at is that there will be attempts at setting up a league and it failing, and then another league has a go, etc. This is how soccer or football has progressed in the States, and we've seen that's gone through. Had a number of competitions have tried to set up. I mean, Pelé and Beckenbauer back in the day went to play across in the States, and that competition collapsed. So it shouldn't be a surprise that actually that the first attempt at professional rugby in the States hasn't succeeded. And it shouldn't be a worry either. I say that we'll see if Major League Rugby doesn't work, we'll see someone else have another go, and eventually one of these leagues is going to stick and is going to work. Obviously, the advantage that Major League Rugby has over Pro Rugby is that it's the risk is split amongst at least 10 entities rather than just the one. And so if one does collapse, there are others there still to pick it up. But that's basically the big difference. Doug actually fell out with a couple of those clubs that are joining Major League Rugby. The Raptors, Griffindale Raptors, for example, I know he fell out with around the contracting of players and which players were available to play in what games, whether for the club or for Pro Rugby. So it's unsurprising that they are one of the teams that are involved in this. So that's a major difference, and we'll be watching with interest as to see how they go. They did their official announcement last week, saying that they were going to exist. Before that, there'd been sort of quiet or been announcements, but not actually official. That was their official sort of go live, and that they're definitely happening in next year. And it'll be interesting to see as we go along how this progresses. Some of the teams are playing each other this year under the Major Rugby Championship rather than MRL, since the MRC, and they're basically friendly games this season while the clubs put themselves together and get themselves ready for next season. So thank you very much for watching me. Do sign up for my weekly newsletter, link above on Twitter or down below on YouTube. Don't forget to share this with your friends who want to know the differences between Major League Rugby and Pro Rugby, or give it the old thumbs up on YouTube, all much appreciated. And I'll be back tomorrow with my Super Rugby predictions, then I'll have my European Champions Cup and Challenge Cup finals predictions coming out on Wednesday. So thank you all for joining me, and see you next time.